Our two candidates, we have Lincoln Ishida, who is currently the Corporation Counsel for the county. And we have Mitch Roth, who's currently a Deputy Prosecuting Attorney for the county. I'd like to preface this. We have not had a serious county prosecutor race for about 20 years, so most of us haven't really thought about this position. Before I start, by the way, please, I urge you, take as much opportunity as you can to see and hear all the candidates multiple times, because these are big decisions for our prosecutors, for our mayors, and if you see there's a candidate for them, even if you've already seen the candidates, go, because you may learn something new. Now, the county charter very specifically defines what the job is of county prosecutor, and it says, the job is to prosecute offenses against county and state laws wherever they need to be tried, in the county, state, or elsewhere. Institute proceedings or direct the police to do so, to arrest persons accused of public offenses, to bring indictments before the grand jury. They also may research, evaluate, and make recommendations about crime to appropriate officials, and provide public and police education and training, and apply for and receive grants to fund those additional activities. Now to our forum, and the candidates will each have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer this first question, starting with Mr. Ishida. Please tell us why you are running for county prosecutor and a little bit about your qualifications to do so. 90 seconds, please.
Aloha mai kako, everyone. Good afternoon. When I woke up this morning, crawled out of bed, brushed my teeth, I had a lot of choices to make. Chose to wear this shirt today because, well, it was the only one that was ironed. I normally choose to eat cereal in the morning, but today was Friday, so I decided I'll go to Blaine's and have fried rice plate. And for many of you, you had choices as well, and that's one of the wonderful things about living in our country, being a United States citizen, is that we have the freedom of choice. I'm running for prosecuting attorney because the one area where none of us have a choice is whether you are going to be a victim of crime or not. And when you are a victim of crime, it is your right and it is the responsibility of the prosecuting attorney to properly and compassionately respond and advocate and fight for the rights of all crime victims. In my 13.5 years as service as prosecuting attorney in this county, I have prosecuted some of the most notorious kidnap, rape, murder crimes on our island. I have been there in court with the victims of crimes, holding their hands.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ishida. You know you're going to get cut off whenever you exceed.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just like a prosecutor. You offend, you get penalties. Okay, Mr. Mitch Roth, why are you running? Tell us a little bit about your qualifications. 90 seconds.
Aloha. My name is Mitch Roth. I'm running for Hawaii County's prosecutor to keep our island safe and healthy. I have 19 years as a deputy prosecuting attorney. When no one from our office stepped up to run, I felt it was incumbent upon me to do so. Right now, our criminal justice system is broken. Our jails are full. Every time we put people in, we kick people out. Our probation officers, their loads are overloaded. Parole officers, roles are overloaded. Our recidivism rate in this county is about 60%. That means that people who are breaking the laws are coming back 60% of the time and breaking more laws. We know that number because that's the number that we're catching. Einstein said, if you keep on doing what you've always done and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. We need to make some changes to make our island safer and healthier. The traditional status quo is not going to get us there.
Thank you very much. I want to ask a couple of questions that speak specifically to qualifications based on the definition of what the job is. And starting with you, Mr. Roth, talk about your background in actually prosecuting cases, which is the #1 definition of the job. 90 seconds, please.
So I've been a prosecutor for 19 years. I started out in Honolulu. I went through the traditional trial run. I've had jury trials. I've went through charging. I started something in Honolulu, though, called community-oriented prosecution. Community-oriented prosecution is a proactive approach to solve crimes by building partnerships. It also works on prosecuting cases, so I do prosecute cases. I do have jury trial experience. I have tried numerous cases. In jury trials, I've had other bench trials and other motions. The position I hold right now as a community-oriented prosecutor, sometimes I handle cases there, but I also handle the asset forfeiture unit for our island. Our island's asset forfeiture unit, where we take away the proceeds and items used to facilitate crimes, has been probably the most successful in the state. In the last 4 years, we've done about half of the state's asset forfeiture just on this island, and it's been pretty much under one deputy, myself.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ishida, talk to us about your background in actually prosecuting cases, which is the #1 definition of the job. 90 seconds.
Thank you, Sherry. During my career and service as a prosecutor, I've personally prosecuted in excess of 200 major felony cases. The majority of those cases were violent crime cases, murders. With respect to rape cases, I did 100% of all adult rape cases on the Hilo side, as well as 1/2 of all the child sex assault cases on this entire island. Kidnap, robberies, property crimes. I prosecuted virtually every single crime in the Hawaii Penal Code. Multiple jury trial convictions in multiple rape, multiple murder cases. With respect to some of the other types of offenses out there, we've also worked collaboratively with the Attorney General's office in joint investigations through the U.S. Attorney's office as well. You know, somebody asked me one time about that number 200, and actually, since we're at a forum right now, I'll tell you the actual number is well in excess of 200. It was 363, but by that time we had already printed our campaign literature and it said 200, so that's what we were saying at the forums, but it's closer to 300 or so. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. Mr. Ishida, you're going to get the next question first. A key part of the county prosecutor job is actually being sort of the managing director for a big law firm, because you're going to have a number of other attorneys working with you. I think the number right now is about 30. So talk to us about your managerial experience and administrative experience. 90 seconds, please.
You know, Sherry, that's, I think, one of the tremendous benefits and advantages that I've had. Over the last 12 years, ladies and gentlemen, I've had the honor and privilege as serving you as Hawaii County's Corporation Counsel, the Chief Legal Counsel for the County of Hawaii, and the top civil attorney. During that time, we managed the second largest law firm on this island. I understand budgeting, I understand personnel, but more importantly than that, I understand the concept of servant leadership, which means when we go to work every day, we don't ask our employees to go out there and do something that we wouldn't do ourselves. Rather, as the managers or the boss, we look at our employees and we say, how can I serve you? How can I be a servant leader to provide you the resources and the support so you can do your jobs better than anybody else? So, like I said, Sherry, over the last 12 years, I've had that experience. Tiffany, how much time do I have? Yeah, thank you very much, Sherry.
Thank you. Mr. Roth, you have 90 seconds to talk about your capabilities to actually manage the office.
Okay. I've actually owned my own business and actually have been administrator in that business. I've sat on numerous boards. I've chaired numerous boards and commissions. I've hired and fired people. But you know, what really is important is leadership. If you ask most business owners about hiring people to lead the ship, do you want an administrator or do you want a leader? We have serious problems in this community, not just our island, but our state. And you need a leader that's going to take on and challenge these problems, come up with solutions. I think my experience as a leader in this area has been shown. I've had several successful programs that I've helped as a leader in. Weed and Seed for Pahoa. We've drastically reduced crime in that area. Visitors Aloha Society of Hawaii, I helped bring that to this island. I was told when we started it that we wouldn't have enough victims of crime, or let me just explain, VASH takes care of tourists who are victims of crimes or other serious offenses. We were told that we wouldn't have enough people to actually have a system on this island. Last year we served over 1,000 people. So I've worked on other areas that I'd be happy to talk about. Chair of the State Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and I guess I'm out of time.
Tiffany, do you have a red card to use? It's underneath your 15-second. It's in your hand. Okay. Mr. Roth, we're going to ask you first. There are known criminals here on Hawaii Island, repeat criminals. In fact, in the last couple of weeks, there have been dozens of arrests of burglars in Waikoloa, Hilo, Kona, many of them known for their drug and crime activity. What are the barriers to arresting and convicting known criminals to get them off the streets? And what can you as prosecutor do to help fix that problem of what seems to be a revolving door of people who like to commit crimes? And 90 seconds, please, Mr. Roth.
Well, I think this really is the question. You know, as I say, our prisons are full. It's not so much arresting and convicting them. A lot of these people have been through the system numerous times. They've been in, they've come out. We arrest them, they go in. The prison system's full, our probation system is overloaded. We need to look at putting the right people in, and we need to come up with some other solutions. I talked a little bit about traffic safety. Our ignition interlock system is something that is an immediate consequence. We need to have consequences for these people. You may not be putting them all in prison, but if they have the ignition interlock, they blow, they have alcohol in their breath, the car doesn't start. We have things like that right now, electronic monitoring, that I believe our island's not using. We can have a electronic bracelet with the GPS tracking put on people's feet who are lower level criminals. We don't have to fill our jails with these people. If they leave their houses, if they're on house arrest, they can have modified house arrest so they can go to work and be productive members of society. We can have those people freeing up jail cells that are desperately needed to keep our more serious offenders in.
Mr. Ishida, relative to repeat offenders, and let's take a look particularly at the burglaries we've had island-wide, where the same people do it over and over again. How do we get these kind of people off the streets? What can you do as prosecutor to help fix the problem? 90 seconds.
You know, it has everything to do with arresting them, convicting them, and sending them to prison. When you're talking about repeat offenders out there, who we call the career criminals, it's about community protection at that point. We have sentencing laws in the state of Hawaii that address these repeat offenders. It's no longer discretionary with a judge. And if you're talking about burglaries, Sherry, home burglaries, those are Class B felonies. What that does, it triggers what's called the mandatory minimum sentencing in Hawaii, which means you can take the discretion out of the sentencing judge's hands. It becomes a statutory imposed sentence at that point. So it is absolutely about aggressively targeting these people, bringing them speedily before the court, getting them convicted, and sentencing them appropriately. Because at that point, when you're talking about repeat offenders, you have to talk about community protection. Like Mr. Roth talked about, if you're talking first-time offenders, you want to do the social programs, that's good and fine, and I fully support that. But in Sherry's question, when you're talking about the career criminals, those who put all of us at risk, me, you, our neighbors and families, they need to be dealt with expeditiously, they need to be dealt with severely.
I'm going to give each one of you 60 seconds. Tiffany, you got that? 60 seconds to essentially rebut, respond, say anything more you'd like. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Roth, about this particular problem that we seem to be having now and what solutions you can offer as prosecutor.
So, I don't think we're disagreeing about prosecuting people and putting them away and having the sentences. The problem is we still have a lack of jail cells. One of the best things that we can do as a community is work together. So Robert Peel, the father of modern day policing, said the police are the public are the police, with the police being the only members of society that are paid to do what's incumbent upon every citizen. That means it's all of our responsibilities. We have a lot of burglaries, but we've been showed that you can actually reduce the number of burglaries. Leilani Estates, about 15 years ago, we got the community involved. We're able to reduce the burglaries in that community significantly. We just had some stuff in Ocean View Estate We worked with the community, worked with the police. We had people out on bail who were repeat offenders. We went from about 1 a day to about 1 a month, but it was thinking strategically, not just one tool fits all.
Thank you. Mr. Shida, did I say 60 more seconds? That's what I did.
I think you said 3 minutes on this one.
Yeah, I'm just sure that I did. No, 60 seconds.
No, you know, what Mr. Roth said, we're not talking about, again, we're not talking about the programs that look at reducing crime within neighborhoods. You know, I just want to say, just to make this very clear, that's something that I think we as prosecutors, we fully support and endorse. I think what Sherry's question talked about is when you go beyond that. You go beyond that and recognize that in our society, like it or not, the inescapable truth and reality is crime occurs. It's going to occur, and more times than not, as Sherry's question recognized, Mitch said it's 60%, the state stats show it's actually 80%. 80% of the crime is being committed by 20% of the offenders, and those are the career criminal offenders. We are a resource-driven government, both at the state and county level. We start taking our foot off the gas on prosecuting these people, of course the state is going to say you don't need prisons. We need to be vigilant and proactive on the prosecution end. Thank you.
Mr. Ishida, keep the microphone. Let's take a minute and a half and talk about the fact that Mr. Roth brought up a very good point. Our jails are actually fairly full. Right now we've shipped people to other places. What do we do about the jail full problem if we continue to have criminals who need to be in jail? One of the audience members expressed concern that we're just kicking people out of jail, or if they're people who are sentenced to go on weekends, they're just not doing it because there's no room. So give us 90 seconds, your thoughts on the jail full problem.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. I think it has to be addressed in two different ways. One, in terms of a long-term solution, which I was touching on in the last segment. And of course, what are the immediate things that we can do right away to address that problem? First, on the immediate things. Like anything else, when in talking in government and you're talking about limited resources, you have to prioritize. You need to look at those offenders who are out there whose propensity to commit violence and to harm our community, individually or at large, is the greatest. Those are the persons we need to make sure are in jail, not getting their weekend visits to the jail to check in to see if it's full, to see if they really have to stay or not, but those who really need to be incarcerated in order to protect our community. That's the short-term goal, is to look at, I'm sorry? Did you? Okay, to look at prioritizing those offenders. On the long-term solution, again, we are a resource-driven government. I don't think we as prosecutors, the responsible thing to do is to say, well, we're running out of prison space, so we shouldn't put people there. Again, it all comes down to community safety. That is our charter-mandated responsibility. We need to work collaboratively with the state to ensure that there are places where these offenders can be housed, provided necessary services, but most importantly, in a place where they will not harm our community. Thank you.
Mr. Roth, talk to us 90 seconds about the problem we have with full jails and what the solution is.
Well, so let me just clarify something. I'm not talking about taking our foot off the gas. What I'm saying is, if your only tool is a hammer, all your problems are nails. As I said earlier, we have to focus and put the right people in prison and keep the right people in prison. We don't have any disagreement over that. We have to keep those people in, but you need to come up with solutions. Solutions like electronic monitoring, solutions like the ignition interlock, solutions like working with the community to actually reduce crime, solutions like the Hawaii We Do project that mentors people coming out of prison so they're not going back. Our recidivism rate is at 60%. Career criminals are committing about 80%. We know that we can do something with these people if we're working at it and we're coming up with solutions. We just can't look and say, the only thing we're going to do as prosecutors is prosecute cases. Because if you keep on doing that, we're going to keep on getting where we've got. We've showed with various programs, drug nuisance abatement, we've been able to reduce crime significantly in areas. When you look at a crime problem, you have to know what you're looking at. You need a couple of things to address. Criminal, victim, location. And if you can take 1, 2, or 3 sides of that triangle out, you can prevent crime from happening.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. But I'm going to give each of you another minute to deal with another part of this problem. And Mr. Roth, you actually did mention it. So take a minute and talk about reintegration programs. When we have people who are in jail and they're going to come out, we'd like them not to be repeat offenders, even though statistically, not just our state, but nationally, we're at more than 50% recidivism rate, I believe. But what about the reintegration programs here? And I don't even know if this is a county prosecutor job function, but give us a minute.
You know, that's a great point. Is it a county prosecutor job? What really is the job of the county prosecutor? It is community safety. And there's a couple of different agencies. No one's stepping up to say, hey, we need to take leadership in this. Criminals coming out of jail and reoffending is a huge problem. We have programs, like I said, the Hawaii We Do mentoring project. For the last year, they've had several mentees come through this program. Not a single one of them has recidivated. I work with a group in Puna called the Men of Pa'a. Pa'a stands for Stand Firm or Positive Action Alliance. They go through and they do positive things, help clean up, set up, do positive things out in the community. They go through an AA program. They do all this without the government paying anything for them to do it. We've shown that some of them do recidivate, but not at the level. There's a lot of programs that we need to look into, and we as prosecutors need to support if we are going to have a safe and healthy community.
Thank you. Mr. Ishida, reintegration programs.
One of the best things that we've heard recently is the governor looking at perhaps reopening Kulani Prison. Presently, the main prison in the state of Hawaii, Halawa Prison, is a medium maximum security facility. Kulani, when it was opened on our island, and my presupposition is it would continue in this way, is a minimum security prison. As a result, it had a lot of programs available for reintegration that Sherry talked about. As a matter of fact, at one point in time, I don't know if many of our island residents know this, but 100% of all sex offenders in the state of Hawaii were provided services at our Kulani prison on our island. Even then, recognizing that perhaps recidivism, that's one of the words I have a hard time saying, by the way, sex offenders, repeat offenders for sex offenders is probably the highest. I think the state is appropriately spending its time and resources and recognizing at some point in time they will get out, and we want to make sure that every effort is made to provide them services.
Thank you. We've had several questions submitted on marijuana, and if I'm correct, what I understand from, as everybody knows, the citizens of the County of Hawaii voted to make marijuana the lowest priority of law enforcement, both from the police and the prosecutor standpoint. And these gentlemen can address that better than I, but yesterday I believe the judge took a case that was about that and said the law really is not enforceable. So that's just one thing I want to mention before we start. But the questions we have range from, should marijuana be decriminalized here? What's your stance on marijuana? Where are we now with this lowest law enforcement of marijuana? So, you know, just give us your thoughts on the marijuana issue. But I'd like to start with a 30-second for both of you. How much prosecution have we been doing of just marijuana cases? And Ms. Roth, you're in the prosecutor's office. I get the press releases, so I think I know what the answer is, but how much prosecution are we doing just of marijuana crimes?
Just marijuana, and especially low-level marijuana crimes, very, very little. We see marijuana or low-level marijuana cases primarily in our drug cases where they're going after methamphetamine. Just about every methamphetamine case has marijuana. Methamphetamine takes you up, marijuana takes you down. So that's where we're seeing it. We're not seeing a lot of just going after the small-time marijuana dealers.
Mr. Ishida, to be fair, I'll give you 30 seconds. I mean, are we doing much at the county level, in your opinion, relative to just marijuana?
I think what Mr. Roth said is accurate. I don't think that the police are going out of their way to bust or make cases that are purely just low-level, small marijuana possession. If they do make a case, promotion of detrimental drug in the third degree, it's a petty misdemeanor. Generally, it's punishable by a fine. There's rarely any jail time that gets affixed to that. So I guess if your question is, are they going out there and targeting people? The answer is no, but if the case comes before them, they're properly dealt with.
Okay, now let's talk about going forward. What is the county going to do about this lowest level of law enforcement for marijuana? Mr. Roth, give us 90 seconds on it, because I don't even know what the question needs to be now that the law has been proven not to be enforceable. Where is the county on this? I don't know. I don't even know what the question is. Well, let's start with, you can go first, but I will tell you that somebody also wants to know what you think about having Roger Christie in jail on a continued basis, which is not a county decision, that is a federal judge decision.
You know, Sherry,
And take 90 seconds, I'll give each of you 90 seconds to generally address the question, and then we'll move away from it.
Sherry, you know, I was chomping at the bit and volunteering to go first because this is my one chance to punk my friend Mitch over here. Because that case that you mentioned, actually Mitch was sued in that case, and our office was successful in getting him dismissed yesterday from that lawsuit, so you're welcome, Roth. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, you got it. But no, it's the lowest law enforcement priority ordinance was a voter initiative that was passed by the voters in the last election. Basically, what our local county laws are normally passed by our Hawaii County Council. Well, government bodies have what's called the initiative and referendum process, where voters can actually put something on the ballot and have it passed into law if they get enough votes. This was one such law. In a nutshell, it says it directs the police to say personal use of marijuana shall be the lowest law enforcement priority. Problem with this law was this: despite good legal advice at the time to the council that the bill was probably not properly written, they nonetheless pursued having it put on the ballot in that form, and lo and behold, what we had warned the council early on came to fruition, is that it did violate what's called the state preemption provision of our laws, which means you can't pass a county law that is in contradiction to or not consistent with state law. And that's what Judge Nakamura ruled. That's what the appellate court or the appeals court agreed and said, Judge, you're right. So now we're basically stuck with no law.
Thank you. Mr. Roth, 90 seconds.
So first of all, thanks. I'm not even sure why I was getting sued in that. My feeling on marijuana, let's start with medical marijuana, is I'm not a doctor, I don't have a medical degree. Doctor gives it for a legitimate reason. I have no problem. I think a lot has been made about marijuana in our community. It really is not the big bad gorilla in the room. The big bad gorilla in the room is really methamphetamine. It is an evil drug, and it is tearing our community apart. But I think, you know, there's a lot of marijuana activists that want to focus on the marijuana. Again, we're not spending a lot of time on it. As I said earlier, our prisons are full. I do not want to put, you know, a low-level marijuana person in prison to kick out a rapist, a murderer. We have bigger problems than the marijuana. I do believe probably within the next 10 years, it will probably be decriminalized. You know, I don't think we start in this state in doing it, and I'm not saying I'm advocating for that. I have a feeling it will happen just because of what's happening nationally.
Thank you. I'd like to turn to a separate subject, and Mr. Roth, you're going to go first in this one. To what degree is it the responsibility of the county prosecutor to deal with the victims of crimes? How does that happen? Should it happen inside the prosecutor's office? 90 seconds, just talk about the victims of crimes that the prosecutor's office will prosecute.
Okay, so it is absolutely the duty for us to deal with victims of crimes. One of the changes I'm looking at in our office, we have victim witness counselors that generally get in touch with the victims, talk to the victims about the crime, tell them, you know, what services are available, tell them what is going to happen, and so on. One of the big things that happens as a community-oriented prosecutor, when people have complaints, I usually end up talking to them. One of the biggest complaints I get from the community of our office is we didn't even get a chance to talk to the prosecutor. One of the first changes I think we need to make, and I got blasted by some people in my office for saying it, but I'll say it again. If you have a felony case and you're a deputy prosecutor, you should be talking to that victim just out of respect. Give them the dignity and respect. Introduce yourself in the beginning, talk to them midway through, let them know, we have the victim witness counselors that will be letting them know what's going to be going on, but I think we need to be more compassionate to our victims and let them know what is going on.
Thank you. Mr. Ishida, talk about victims.
When you're a prosecutor, your responsibility as part of fighting for the rights of all victims is to be there for the victim and spend time not just talking to them, but just listening to them. They need to be heard. Their stories need to be told. This may be a case that you may not even end up prosecuting or filing charges because there's some evidentiary problem or not enough proof or witnesses. But you need to invest the time, you need to invest the effort, and you need to invest the heart in being there and listening, giving them the time of day. When that case is charged, it's not enough just to be there and say, okay, you got to show up at court at such and such a time, and these are the questions I'm going to ask you. You're going to have to be their translator for the vast majority of people, especially victims who are minding their own business but who are victimized. Coming into the criminal justice system is being like transported into a foreign world, a different planet. And you need to be there to explain what's going to happen next, to satisfy their expectations, but most importantly, just to be there to listen. So yes, Sherry, absolutely. That is our responsibility.
Mr. Ishida, what about domestic violence? If you are elected prosecutor, where will domestic violence prosecution fall in your level of priorities? And is this something that the county prosecutor's office can address from a prevention standpoint? 90 seconds.
Absolutely. Domestic violence is something that just doesn't affect the victim of that particular crime, Sherry, but it affects families. It affects the children who see and witness that every day. It affects the families that are torn apart because then people end up taking sides, saying, well, she's making it up, or he's really not that bad. It tears apart the fabric of our community when it does that. And the role of the prosecutor is to intervene and ensure that not only offenders are protected, but to ensure and coordinate that services are provided not only for victims of domestic violence, but for their families. There are excellent service providers currently out there in our community who provide those services. I view the role of the prosecutor as being the point person, because it will be the prosecutor that dictates whether a case is charged or not. But the prosecutor needs to be in charge of ensuring and coordinating with all the agencies out there who are providing services to not only the victims, but family members as well, to ensure that everyone receives necessary services. With that intervention, what we're hoping to do is to break that cycle of violence, really create paradigm shifts within family units who have been exposed to that type of victimization. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roth.
Absolutely, domestic violence is preventable. One of the things we should remember is that domestic violence is a route to other crimes. Kids that come from homes of domestic violence, 6 times more likely to commit suicide than kids that don't come from homes of domestic violence. 24 times more likely to be involved with sexual assault. 60 times more likely to be involved with drugs. 100 times more likely to be involved with domestic violence than kids that don't come from homes of domestic violence. Now, I'm not saying 100% of those kids are going to be involved. In fact, only 3%. The big thing is we need to put prosecutors who are dedicated and not using the domestic violence family court rotation as a stepping stone to move up in the ladder. Domestic violence is often seen as a woman's issue. If you study it in this school, you'd probably do it in a woman's study. I saw Zach from the Men of Strength, where the men of this college are getting together to actually work and take responsibility as men, because this affects all of us. And as prosecutors, I agree with what Lincoln said. We need to be the point with all the agencies working together to make sure that we have solutions to this problem.
Thank you. I'd like us to turn to the issue of driving under the influence, which is a huge issue here on the island. In fact, this year so far, we've had 30 fatalities to date from traffic crashes, double the number we had last year, and police reports indicate at least half of these were as a result of alcohol or drug impairment. And I've gotten so many questions on this, I'm hardly sure where to start. But I'd like to start with the speed of prosecuting the offense. And this is really brought to mind by a very recent accident, and I know I can't ask you to comment on an actual current case, but let's say that a week ago Monday there was a traffic crash where a man who was driving drunk and had been previously convicted drove a van off the road and 2 women died. As a theoretical example, that man, let's say, has not yet been charged, at least the police have not issued that. How can we charge these cases faster rather than putting people back on the street? Mr. Roth. And by the way, I'm a layperson, so I'm coming at you from a layperson standpoint on this.
So what you're talking about is when people drive under the influence and they kill someone, it's called negligent homicide. Basically, our office right now, this is one of the big changes that we need to make. It's taking us about a year and a half to get to the starting line, to where we're indicting these people. I was involved with 3 cases last year. We charged at the time of the incident. As a prosecutor, we have an ethical duty not to charge cases unless we believe we can prove them beyond a reasonable doubt. That is not to say that we do not charge cases unless we have every piece of the puzzle in there. We know, for example, in the cases that we charged last year, that we were going to get the blood results. We know that we were going to get the traffic investigation. We have 180 days from the date of charge to the date to try this case. My belief is we need to change our paradigm, our culture a little bit in our office so that we're charging these cases as quickly and as quickly as possible. You know, we may not charge every single case at the day of the incident, but waiting a year and a half, that is absolutely ridiculous and something that has to change.
Thank you, Mr. Ishida. Faster charging.
You know, since leaving the prosecutor's office, I've had the unique opportunity of sort of watching the cases that go through that office from a citizen's point of view, your point of view, but also having the benefit of my experience as a prosecutor, having worked there and understanding some of the barriers and some of the legal barriers out there. I don't think it's appropriate or correct just to make a blanket statement that the system is broken or what's occurring at the prosecuting attorney's office is necessarily wrong. Those are some of the most finest and dedicated public servants and professionals that I've ever worked with in my life. Every case is different. Every case presents its unique circumstances. I think using one case that perhaps was in the media where there are unanswered questions concerning what occurred, unnecessarily and unfairly maligns, I think, the good work that that office does. That being said, I completely agree that if errors were made, we need to look at correcting them, addressing them to ensure that that does not happen again and people are not hurt. But I think before you do that, you need to carefully and correctly analyze that particular case, look what the cause is, what the root cause is. Was it an anomaly? Was it a problem with the system? Because I think just by making a statement that it's broken. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Ishida. I'd like to give each one of you 30 seconds longer to address this issue. Let's start with you, Mr. Roth.
So I wasn't even referring to this incident here. I'm just saying, in general, it's taking us about a year and a half to get these cases charged. And we need to look and say, what can we prove? And what are the police going to do? When are we going to get it? Our duty, again, we cannot charge cases unless we believe we can prove them beyond a reasonable doubt. From a lot of the times, these cases I dealt with last year, there was arguments, but we went forward. 2 of those cases have been convicted.
Thank you. 30 seconds more, Mr. Ishida.
Thank you, Sherry. Just to reiterate what we were talking about earlier, I think you really need to examine each case within the 4 corners of not only factually what occurred, but what unique legal issues are presented in that case. I don't think we have a systemic problem where these types of cases, 100% of them are taking that long to prosecute. I cannot believe that that is accurate. I might be wrong because I'm not at that office now, but I can't believe that it's taking that long in all of those cases.
I'm going to ask a 1-minute question, and Mr. Ishida, you'll go first. We do now have an interlock ignition law, which means if one is convicted of drunk driving, they're supposed to put a device on their car, they have to breathe into it before they drive. If they do not, it appears that nobody's following up, and I am using a theoretical example of a recent case, so I know it happens. The question is, whose job is it to follow up, and if it's a law issue, is this something the prosecutor's office should address to get the law to be more consistent with making sure we don't have these repeat guys? And take a minute, 60 seconds.
Thank you, Sherry. What Sherry's talking about is a law that requires if you are convicted of a drunk driving offense or a drug-related driving offense, that you basically have to blow in order for you to operate your vehicle. Well, I'll tell you what, it only works for people like us, you and I, who are responsible citizens, who will have it and pay the money, because you have to come up with that money to install it in your vehicle, be law-abiding and vigilant enough to follow up and actually do what you're supposed to do. But what happens in probably 10 out of the 10 cases is we're not dealing with the law-abiding person. They say, forget it, I'm not driving that car. I got 250 bucks in my pocket. I'm going down the road buying another used car, junk that I can drive. And I think that's what you're seeing happen. I know Sherry referred to a hypothetical. We started dancing around it, but that's basically what we're talking about. That interlock program will not work in that situation. So Sherry's question, who follows up with it? Whose responsibility is it? It's everyone.
Thanks, Mr. Ishida. Tiffany says we're done.
Sorry, I got confused.
60 seconds. Mr. Roth.
You had got a minute and 10 seconds.
So he gets a minute and 10 seconds? Okay, you get a minute and 10 seconds.
So let me correct you first of all. What happens is you get caught for DUI, driving under the influence, your license gets suspended. You get the opportunity to get ignition interlock, which will allow you to drive. If you drive with a suspended license, you can be arrested for driving with a suspended license, and there's mandatory jail for that. If you don't get the ignition interlock, it is not an offense unless you're driving. That being said, I sat on the task force that got this bill passed. You know, in the first year and a half, we've had over 11,000 alcohol-positive prevented starts. That means over 11,000 times people with alcohol on their breath started to start their car, blew in, the car did not start. I don't know, you know, that's not 10 out of 10 law-abiding citizens. That's people that actually put it on, had alcohol in their breath, tried to start the car didn't start, and so it prevented them from driving. I can't tell you how many lives that saved, but I'm guessing there's a few that it did save. And we have to make a change in the number of deaths because we lead the nation.
Thank you. Sometimes as a citizen, it seems as though bail that is set for criminals seems a little bit low. And I'd like to know, and this is a 1-minute question, is there a way as prosecutor to get bail that is high enough to actually make somebody think twice? I don't know if bail is supposed to be a deterrent or just a way to get a revolving door, but address that, Mr. Roth. 1 minute.
So we have bail schedules set by the judiciary that set regular bail, high bail, and then in certain cases, you have to understand what happens when the police charge a felony case. They arrest the person, they call the prosecutor, they ask for a charging decision. A lot of times the prosecutor will tell them, call the judge and ask for extra high bail. That's why you see sometimes people with $1 million bail, has to be a prosecutor telling them, give the judge these reasons to set bail at X amount.
Thank you. Mr. Ishida.
We should direct that question at some of my students out there at the UH, because are you guys carrying around your Constitution like I asked you to? You guys have it in your books there? No. We were just talking about this the other night, and it's the 8th Amendment of our Constitution, which guarantees a person a right to bail, but it has to be reasonable bail. And the reality is, in our criminal justice system, bail is not used as a punishment tool. It's used to ensure appearance. However, that being said, going back to what we talked about earlier about community safety, there are mechanisms within the law to ensure that bail is set.
Was that 60 seconds, Tiffy? So he has 30 seconds left? Okay, go.
So there are provisions in our laws, and judges have agreed in cases where there is a significant risk of harm to the public based upon the heinous nature of the act or the characteristics of this defendant being a flight risk or other danger, you can ask for extra high bail or no bail. We have done that successfully in the past. It's a case-by-case evaluation and assessment. The defense will argue it's being used as punishment.
Thank you.
We say we're using it for community safety.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to have one more question before we go to our closing statements. And the question is a 1-minute question. Are you smiling, Tiffany? A 1-minute question. And the question is, prisons. Would things be better if we had privatized prisons? Is that a good idea, bad idea? I know that you're running for county prosecutor and you're not actually going to deal with the prison system per se, but would that help solve some of our problems, do you think? Mr. Ishida, we're going with you for 60 seconds.
You know, when we prosecuted the Dana Ireland case, we brought back this prisoner who was incarcerated in Oklahoma who had some information, and we needed him as a witness. We brought him back to Hawaii, and we were talking to him and debriefing him. He told me at the get-go, he said, "Ashida, just do me one favor." And I said, "Oh no, he's gonna ask for a deal or concession." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Promise me after I testify, you send me back to that prison in Oklahoma." And then he started to tell me they have like dorm pods with their own locks and keys for their rooms. They go to work during the day at a factory next door. They get paid about minimum wage that goes into their prison budget account that they can use in the store that they have in the prison. Honestly, Sherry, my time is up.
Honestly, you want to go to prison in Oklahoma? Is that the bottom line here if you ever get convicted? Mr. Roth, what do you think? Is privatizing prisons maybe an answer to our problems with prisons? 60 seconds.
You know, that's a great question. Not really sure, but I know that we went from, in the last 20 years, about 1,000 prisoners in this state to about 6,000 prisoners that we've locked up. Every prisoner that we put away over on the mainland is costing us about $70,000. I think we need to have, you know, the amount of prison space we have, but I think we need to look for alternative solutions. I've been working with a group called Ohana Ho'opakele, working on something called Puho Nua, restorative justice for some of these people who are coming back in their last year. Reintegrate them into society so we don't have to keep on locking people up over and over and over and over and over and over and over again.
And over again. Okay, we're going to give each of our candidates 90 seconds in which they can make a closing statement of their own choice. And Mr. Roth, we're starting with you. 90 seconds.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for coming out and actually getting informed about what we're talking about. You know, as I said earlier, our system is broken. We, in the prosecutor's office, need to look at making our community safe and healthy. There's a lot of different agencies that can step up and take the leadership role. We need to be innovative leaders, or we're going to keep on getting what we've always got. Of course we're going to be prosecuting people. Of course we're going to be putting people away. But we need to find solutions. I believe that my experience in 19 years as a prosecutor, my experience over the last 12 years as being, you know, in the office, seeing what's happening with crime and knowing all of the different areas in our office of what's going on gives me a little advantage to work on solving some of these problems that need to be solved. Because if we don't do it, we went from 1 to 6, we'll have 15,000 people in prison, and it's going to cost you and me as taxpayers a whole lot of money. So I thank you very much again for coming out, and I'd appreciate your vote a lot.
Thank you. And now Mr. Ishida, 90 seconds.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you all for coming out today, giving us your attention, and also for submitting those questions that you did. Our next prosecuting attorney for this county must be someone who possesses two very important things. Number one, that person must be an accomplished and proven trial attorney. The reason that person has to be an accomplished trial attorney, because as Sherry pointed out at the beginning, that is the core function of the prosecuting attorney's office. You need to prosecute offenders. Crime will happen in our community, and when it happens, you need the best stable of prosecuting attorneys who can effectively and compassionately respond to that crime when it happens. I've been blessed during my service as a prosecuting attorney to prosecute perhaps some of the most notorious criminals that have ever existed on our island. We've been successful in that regard, but we learned a lot in doing those cases. We learned that when you go about prosecuting these cases, it's not just about dealing with the evidence, prosecuting the person, and putting them away to protect the community. It's about validating the fears of victims. It's about having them heard. Secondly, the next prosecuting attorney must be someone who's a proven administrator, has the leadership skills and experience, and has proven that by running a law office. And that's what I bring to the table. And again, I thank you all very much. Aloha.
Thank you. Before we thank our candidates, let me remind you that it's really important to vote. So if you're not registered, you may do so by October 8th. You may apply for an absentee ballot by October 30th. Take opportunities to hear and see these candidates in other forums. And this gentleman asked me to list some of them. I don't have the list of all of them, but you may listen on the radio this Sunday, Lava 105.3 FM to U.S. Senate Forum at 2 o'clock. On the 1st of October, Monday night at 6 o'clock, you may hear from the mayors and the prosecutors on Lava 105.3 FM. They're going to be live at Kealakekee High if any of you'd like to join us. And October 8th, same thing, 6 o'clock live on Lava 105 from Kealakekee High. County Council candidates from Volcano through South Kona and Waimea. Now, let's give a warm round of applause for these gentlemen for public service and their running. Thank you. Aloha.